Great. Okay. So we're now being live streamed onto YouTube. So thank you everybody who's going to be joining me live. Let me know when you get here live. Say hello. Let us know you're here. I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend, Dr. Patrick McManaway today. So welcome, Patrick.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me to participate and share with your audience. It's a pleasure to get to work together again.
It's lovely to see you again, because we've had quite a long absence where we've not been in contact, so it's great to catch up. So we're going to be talking about grace today. This is a subject, I suppose, in recent years, particularly with COVID, well, actually all my life, but more recently, I think has become more dear to my heart, the value of living in grace and allowing this sort of timely and perfect unfolding and things in front of us without necessarily fretting and getting tangled up in lots of stuff. And I know you've written a wonderful book called Keys to Grace. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do and why grace is so important in that work?
Yes, I think like you, Faye, the longer I've worked in the dowsing and shamanic fields, everything I think ultimately comes down to the quality of consciousness that we hold in the moment. And that really defines not only our experience of the moment, but also, as you well know, only in that sort of zone, grace space, can we effectively communicate and connect with the realms that we access through dowsing, in my life and yours, some nature spirits, elementals, discarnate spirits, working with energies. Our clarity of perception, as well as our effectiveness and clarity of communication and proactive engagement, really seems to be defined almost with a safety valve on how much in grace we are. And the more we're in that sort of zone, things open and the world flows with us. And as we come out of it, it's like trying to access the world through a smaller and smaller pathway that's more constrained or disfigured or distorted, and requires more energy to create the same effect. So I think, and certainly my teachers told me this, and I didn't hear it until I was well into my 40s. But I think that's really a central key, is to, and possibly an ultimate goal anyway, is the quality of consciousness that we can language with the word grace. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we sort of, there's this huge concept, isn't there, in really, I suppose, in modern world, of sort of discrete and separateness and individualism, that almost fails into taking into account that we are sort of bioenergetic beings existing in this smorgasbord of energy, in these constantly fluid relationships. And unless we allow ourselves to be in grace and in flow, then we almost clash. We come up against obstacles that weren't there because we weren't in the right place and movement to be in symbiosis with what was happening. We are constantly swimming against the tide rather than allowing ourselves to go with it and having faith that it's going to work out. You know, it can't possibly not work out, but we have this mentality of we have to be doing something all the time. We have to be taking action. And to a degree we do, but not in this sort of bullish, it's my way or the highway mentality. And I think grace allows us to be in a place of knowing and unknowing. And it's where that conjunction of knowing and unknowing meets that the new emerges. And I think where we're in grace, with that is what we ultimately allow to happen, this emergence of new possibilities, of new openings, of new ways of being, of new ways of seeing. And if we're constantly trying to be in a state of knowing, we've got one foot on solidity, but we've lost the other balance. Does that make sense?
It certainly does to me. And there's that classic informational hierarchy of, is it data, information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom?
Yeah.
And so we can get distracted in more specific and concrete layers of that without having the wisdom to see the context and how the whole is working together.
Yeah, I think grace allows us, without having acquired the wisdom somehow, it still allows us this top-down view, doesn't it? To just say, nah, what's the worst that can happen? And we just kind of go along with things, and it does make life a lot easier. So do you want to, I know you've got something to show us about grace. So
Yes.
yeah, for those people who've joined us.
Just as it is, as we're discussing and exploring, it's such a central theme to me. I've given a fair bit of thought to it. I'm not an expert.
I know you've got something to show us about grace. So. Sorry about that.
I don't claim expertise or mastery in this. It's a lifelong exploration and practice that I aspire to, and maybe in another few lifetimes I'll get better at it. But just giving it thought and consideration to try and help us navigate awareness really around where we're at. So I've got about 45 slides that we'll run through in fairly quick order. First, just exploring, what we mean by grace, what that includes, and then looking a little bit at the resonance, physics and metaphysics, and then a couple of short practices at the end. So without further ado, let me share my screen. This one. Here we are. Just confirming you're seeing my screen there, Faye.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Lovely.
I'm sure everybody else can if I just refresh my YouTube channel. And if anybody has any questions they want to put in the chat box, I see people are watching. So if anybody's got anything that they want to ask at the end, then do please type them in the chat box and we can address those.
Lovely. So keys to grace. What is grace? That's really the conversation. I think that's our sort of spiritual classical term for a state that we all recognize, that we access in different ways. Maybe we're in love, or we're enraptured with a sunrise or a sunset, or a performance or a song or a dance we're part of. So we're talking about a quality of consciousness. And it's a quality of consciousness that gives us clarity, performance, and ease. So Faye and I, working between worlds, there's an awareness that we have a soul mind, which is our eternal self that moves around the universe and skips in and out of lifetimes. And then we have our body mind, which is responsible for navigating current social, economic, physical needs, survival, shelter, which we can consider the body mind. And by nature, the body mind is executive in function and detail oriented. And the soul mind is qualitative and observational. And so given that the soul is having a life, ideally just in sort of trying to start building metaphors and associations, we might want to think of soul mind as being chairman of the board, and body mind as being CEO. So part of what we're looking at here is when we align to quality rather than content, then we access connections, because the body mind, the executive mind, is introvert by nature and necessity. It's the soul mind that's extrovert and connective. So body mind, introvert, insular; soul mind, expansive, connective, thinks in quality, observes, body, mind, executive, introverted, thinks in detail and specifics. And ideally we want, that's our sort of grace alignment. That's when body and mind and spirit are all at ease and attuned, at one, attuned. And that's our sort of grace space but we access that through qualitative consciousness, and then it flows from quality into content. So the key to grace is to recognize that it's a quality of consciousness, circumstance regardless, and that when we hold a tone, an attitudinal tone, circumstances organize themselves to agree with that. The universe is reflective to us, as we know, and responds to what we project. So if we're projecting ruthless compassion, I love you no matter what, that holds a tone that allows circumstances to reconfigure, for example, in interpersonal dynamics. So we're really looking to understand the primary importance of, and then how to be aware of the quality of our quality, the quality of our attitude. So sports psychologists would think of this as the zone. If we're at Wimbledon in the final, probably everybody's eaten the same amount of Weetabix and jumped up and down the same number of times over their skipping rope. And as we know, as we watch, and it's so exciting, we're really watching a battle of will. And it's the attitude and whether people can hold that quality of peak performance throughout a match, even if they miss or slip or fall or mess up. How well prepared is their attitude before they start, and then during the match, how quickly can they recover their attitude at any moment when it should wobble. So we don't need to think ruthless competition at Wimbledon, but that's just sort of a metaphor for our day, because always, and we know, and we reflect on it and we talk about it, the experience of the day is reflective of our attitude. And so the more we look into this, the more we realize the one thing we truly have control over, and maybe the only thing we truly have control over, is our attitude. So this is where we actually have our greatest power in terms of self-organization. And then we observe that it's pretty much, in my experience, and again, please don't think of me as teacher or guru or as expert. I'm a practitioner, and this is the zone that I need to be in order to do the practice that I do. But it's our greatest leverage point in terms of how will an interaction with a client or a circumstance or a child or any arrangement we're making. So then just sort of putting a framework around this, and again, always insert your own words. Baselining to me means what we do on a regular basis to access that space effortlessly. And so for some people that's dancing or a walk in the woods or the yoga class or making food and sharing it with family. But whatever we do that truly nourishes our soul and puts us into a grace state, often we think of that as an indulgence. For baselining, what we want to move that into is primary importance, because once we see the empowerment and efficiency that grace gives, it's worth actually not indulging, but truly nourishing our grace state, our happiness, our deep sense of wholehearted well-beingness. Faye, you might help me remembering, I think Henry Thoreau once, when asked if he had 3 hours to cut down a tree, what would he do? And he said, I'd spend the first 2 hours sharpening the blade and then the third hour chopping. So it's sort of that. It's what you do, not to sharpen the blade, but to lighten the heart.
It is. Is that I can't think who said about meditation as well. You know, we should all meditate for, I don't know, what is it, an hour a day, unless we're busy, and then we should meditate for 2. And it's that prioritizing that self-care kind of element of it that says, if I'm not in this state, then the whole of the day goes out. I can't be productive. Like you say, I can't engage with clients correctly. I can't engage with these energy fields correctly. So yeah, so it's that inner prep work, but you say we so often dismiss it as indulgence rather than the deep prep
Rather
work we
than
have to do.
exactly, if you were your own manager, you'd make sure that you did that, as it were. Now, just sideways, when I got into this and started sort of practicing, experimenting, I literally found I doubled my efficiency. If I was ruthless and sat and just got into the zone before moving into the day in the office, before looking at the email or the phone call, or back in the day we had faxes, I remember those, even we had letters. But I found that if I didn't get distracted into the busyness, but really just got into the zone and then moved when I felt I was in the zone, the phone would call and it would be the first person on my list and they'd be calling me, and I'd have an appointment that I needed and it would just fall together. And it was sort of like Star Wars or something. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff. And I found I got through the whole of my work in half the time, literally. Foolishly and reflective wisdom, I then doubled my workload. What then happened was when I fell out of grace, at this point, then I had 4 times as much work as I could manage, and it would take me days or weeks to recover. So, what I got to be very acutely aware of how easy it was and how synchronous. Anyway, just so
and also, I suppose, in essence as well, how easy it is for us sometimes to slip out of when we're in grace, or we just forget. It's just gone the next minute.
It's a sliding scale. And I think that's really main sort of part of this is it's that awareness of, it's the self-awareness of whether we're in or out of grace, and having some kind of flag for the consciousness to track that sliding scale. So present awareness then. So baselining, as we say, present awareness is just exactly that. Am I in or out of it? And then once we drop out of it, how quick can we get back in without having to wait for yoga class next Tuesday? So when we're in grace, all kinds of marvelous things happen. Firewalking, this is my firewalking instructor, Heather Rice, mother of my child. All kinds of marvelous things can happen when we're in a state of grace, obviously. So one thing in my mind, because grace is a quality, it's almost like it comes as a package. It's not a single thing that we're looking for. It's a central quality of consciousness that comes almost like Microsoft Office, that includes Word and PowerPoint and Excel. I don't know as a computer metaphor, but it's not a singular thing. It's a state of consciousness that brings multiple experiences of gracefulness. And so this is just one list of what we get when we're in that zone. We experience transactional love and love of self and environment and other. Truth is definitely one of the aspects of grace. Beauty, meaning true essence rather than chocolate box pretty, but the truth in terms of the true of a wheel or the true of a keel, and alignment and integrity. Beauty, truth and beauty, peace, gratitude, courage, which is different from bravery, because courage by its name comes from the heart. It's a strength of spirit, strength and freedom. So these all sort of come as a single package. And if you've got any one of those, you've pretty much got them all at the same time. You can't easily have one without another. It's a sort of global state of being that includes these things. So then how do we get into that state? Naturally following and pursuing our own inspiration, relaxing and enjoying into the moment, the sort of mindfulness of just being where we are, doing what we're doing. Gratitude, I think, is the easiest access point for us when we're out of grace. To me, gratitude is the lowest rung on the rescue ladder that God hangs down for us. And it was a lovely study I saw. Dr. Hamilton, why love is good for you. I'm not quoting him right. I'll get that reference. But anyway, he found a study where if you said thank you 10 times a day, whether you meant it or not, it dropped your blood pressure by 10 millimeters of mercury. And so it was an effective, biofeedback antihypertensive, but it was gratitude. And just, I found many times, and there's an exercise we'll finish with where the sort of just say it even if you don't mean it until you find that it is meaningful. I find gratitude's my easiest way in. Compassion, the ability to be present and engaged without attachment other than to the quality of your witness. I think that's what compassion is. It's holding a loving witness regardless of circumstance. So it's very much an aspect of grace. Forgiveness, again, the witness of self and of past, holding a quality of grace and allowing circumstances to be contextualized so that we can be at peace. We can get grace through action, but we can also get grace through surrendering to boredom. In my handbook, The Keys to Grace, I didn't include boredom. I only realized after I'd written that thing that boredom is an absolute key to grace. And if you're willing to just be bored long enough until you get up and do the next thing, the next thing is generally, it comes from an inside place. So anyway, we can allow ourselves to access grace through boredom, I think, if we want to.
I'm a big fan of a little boredom, actually. I think it's a great stimulator for making us subconsciously, like I say, take that first step that's going to lead us somewhere. Just by taking that first step, it's a big step.
Yeah. So how do we track it through the day? What are the signs and symptoms of being in grace? What's happening around us to tell us that we're in? So flow, synchronicity, taking delight in simple things, ease, joy, happiness, satisfaction, and contentment. I particularly look for satisfaction and contentment, whether I do a lot or a little, or that's one of my favorites. So if any of these are going on, it means that you're somewhere on the sliding scale of grace above your baseline. And I think this is a sliding scale, Faye. I think it's not you're in or you're out. It's you get as much of it as you're in at. And I have in my mind what I call a working state of grace, which means I get to be human and mess up and be grumpy, but I'm still focused on it. And if I'm hitting at least 80-85%, it's generally pretty good for the day. And sometimes you peak, of course, and sustain. But I think just to, if we blame ourselves for not being in grace, then we're feeding back the other way. So we want to be in gratitude for as much grace as we've got.
Yeah. Even if it's only 5%, be grateful for that.
Focus on the 5%.
Focus on the 5%. Yeah, it's not an absolute, as you say, it's a scale. We slide up and down continually.
And it's more fun the higher we're at. Yep. Wholeheartedness, I think, is a sign of being in grace. A sense of body, mind, and spirit all being aligned and being on the same song sheet together. Clarity and connection, that extrovert nature, where love flows outwards as well as inwards. So good to track, what's your percentage? Are you in or out? as we said earlier in presentation, I think the key is to notice when we fall out, because we get distracted into a mind loop of hamster wheel judgment or grumpiness or just somethingness, and it feeds itself. And he said, she said, didn't ought to, wouldn't have, if something, and it's very compelling and seductive. Yeah. So noticing the moment, and sometimes it's just a nanosecond, where your mind gets pulled into some kind of reactive circumstance that you might have, you know, a lot of emotional previous ready to go, you know, stuff about.
You burst the dam. Yeah.
I think the key then is noticing when we've fallen out of grace. And so what are the signs and symptoms of not being in grace? Having a sense of a lack of as a baseline. Sorry, I'm just needing to move my, yes, a lack of everything wholesome in varying degree. So affirmations of fear, disconnection, isolation, a contraction basically from the world, and a difficulty in connecting, and a sense of not enough, whether it's not enough money.
And I think there is a lot of, sorry. Yeah, I think there is a lot of lack mentality about nowadays as well. Always, people are always looking for something more. You know, I need to be further along the line in my spiritual growth. I need to have more money. I need to be out there doing more. And it's just this sort of lack mentality is, I think, quite crushing in society. You know, arisen out of, no doubt, you know, systems and structures and forms within society, you know, capitalism, patriarchy and everything else. But it's important to recognize that this lack mentality is in essence puts us out of grace. And that is far more damaging, really, than anything else we can experience. You know, well, not far more damaging, but it disempowers us, and it denies us our sovereignty of our life. I think this lack mentality.
It compromises everything. I totally. What's I done? Oh yes. Hang on a minute. Did I miss one? No. So how do we know we're not in grace? Lack of filling the blanks. Sorry, something's not.
There we go.
Yes. It's not feeling we quite, where are we going? Yes. Sorry, I thought I had another slide with more words on it for this, but when it doesn't go easily, when the phone tag continues instead of the right moment when the call is made, I don't want to say when you miss the bus, but it's just everything becomes difficult, everything becomes stressful, everything, it's sort of the opposite of being in it. So fill in the blanks. So yes, just background awareness of state of mind. In or out of grace, it's easy, it's fun, it isn't easy, it isn't fun. And then, as we said, regular support, baselining, and the quick catch. So let me just whiz through 5 minutes of just justifying this and giving people some visual metaphors, because I know we've looked at a lot of words, and some people are sort of wordy and some people do better with look at. So here's the basic image of our bioelectromagnetic field, previously known as an aura.
Sometimes still known as an aura, yes.
Often still known as an aura. And the issue here, this is obviously a 2D image, but we've got a recirculating resonance. Consciousness exists in waves. And so the waves are either going through time and space, or if you want to be in anything, the wave needs to come into a recursive resonance, so that it's no longer passing through, but it's recirculating around a central focal point, which for us is the electromagnetic generation of our heart. So our heart's really responsible for creating this stable domain that then we can literally, by our mind and attitude and free will, choose what resonances we hold and amplify and give our attention and fill our space with. So we are the masters of our own radio set, and it's easy to use. What happens is simply you tune into whatever you think about, and you tune into it in the way that you feel about it when you think about it. So if I want to be tuned into my raspberry plants, I think about them, and then if I think about them with fear and anxiety because they didn't get pruned, then they'll probably be grumpy with me and get full of aphids. And if I give them love and attention and they inspire me to prune them, then everything will be well. That's a bit of a random, but we fill our space, our resonant space, with the resonant waves of what we think about, content, remember, and then more particularly the quality of our thinking about it, whether we think about it in a grace state or not, defines how we then engage with that content. So we're in control of the resonance. There's a cutaway sort of 3D of that basic field shape. This is called a toroid, and it's the only field form that we know where consciousness can be. To be physical, you have to have one of these. Otherwise, the wave just keeps on going through space. So this is the smoke ring. It's the atom. It's the molecule, the wheat, the person, the planet. Just other images to give a sense of that we are in control of and self-defining of this space. And that's a cross-sectional view, the ripples in the pond of our aura, dense and physical in the middle, and then the emotional space that's sort of our personal space where hugs or step away happens, and then the mental space and the community space. So it's a resonant field, and it has resonance just the same as any other electromagnetic wave. Light is in there in the visible range, radio, X-rays, and right down at the bottom at the left-hand end are our thoughts and feelings, which go 2 octaves above and below a central point of 7.83 waves per second, which is the planetary resonance, the so-called Schumann resonance. This is the heartbeat resonance of the Earth, and we're perfectly attuned to it, literally 2 octaves above and 2 octaves below. This is our middle C if we were looking at a piano. And then within that, we've got 4, or they sometimes get split into 6 or more different bandwidths of our thoughts and feelings. And so these are literally the shape of our thoughts. And at the top there's the awake, alert, the so-called beta, and then the alpha is where we are when we're sort of doing repetitive physical tasks, the dishes, the driving, etc. And then theta is sort of deep daydreaming or night dreaming, and delta's physiological process. And we access different states of our environment through different of these states, but again, when they're coherent, then they all work together. Also, just in terms of waveforms, these are the shapes of waves of emotion expressed by people through touch. And you can see there's literally a different waveform for hate and anger and joy and love. So this is measurable resonance. And the golden ratio is the mathematical ratio that occurs through our heart beat and our brain waves when we're in a grace state. So we can literally measure gray state through the presence of golden ratio resonance in heart and brain. So at some point we'll all have badges that light up green when we're in grace and red when we're not. And I've got the computer software that does that for me when I'm hooked up to it. But maybe at some point we'll have to wear our badges on the street, and then people will pay more attention to us when we're lit up green. We're built for this. The golden ratio defines our physiology. And so from our DNA, through our bony skeleton, through the expression of heart and brain wave, we're literally built around this grace ratio resonance. Just to say, grace is not a frequency, it's a ratio, which means it's a relationship.
Yes.
So if I'm in a grace state regarding you, Faye, it means that our resonance is in golden ratio. It doesn't mean that we're at 6 point this one frequency or 3 megahertz. It means that we're in a ratio relationship, which mathematically is called phi, or the golden mean. But it's not a singular frequency. It's a way that two frequencies are in relationship with each other. Just another image that we're familiar with, how that recirculating wave, the wave's either moving through time and space, or it becomes recursive in time and space. And so that classic Tao symbol that we see is literally that recursive circular wave that we look to create in coherence. Again, different mathematical maps defining the heart as the center of the field, and the self-generating source and point where soul comes into mind and body. And we can map the chakras that way, with the soul in the center, and then to mirroring pathways into the upper and the lower world, as it were, the throat expressive into the upper world, the hara expressive into the middle world, imaginal mind and creation there matching with the sacral sexual creation, and then top and bottom, sort of the plus and minus points on the battery, really, where the charge and potential run through. So lots of maps with heart in the middle. And just quickly, for people who haven't seen these before, in terms of what effect does it have on our environment, the quality of consciousness that we experience it in interpersonal relationship and the circumstances and flow. But for anybody who hasn't, and just for those who have, to quick see again, we can literally see the expression, the resonance of our thoughts and feelings embodied into the crystalline structure of water. And these lovely pictures taken by Dr. Emoto, as you see the photo on the left, ice crystal frozen from severely polluted water. Photo on the right is the same water refrozen after having been blessed. So what we're seeing is coherence, integrity, clarity, fractality, expressing in that environment as an expression, I would say, of grace and of applying love and blessings. So we literally change the structure of our environment through this expression of quality, and also this is internal. What percentage of water are we? We'd like it all to look like, the one on the right rather than the one on the left. Lots of books and pictures online that you can look at, but it's very, very clear, expressing negative emotion, as you can see on that lower row, how it disfigures the resonant pattern in the medium, the quality of consciousness applied in the row above, just literally creating clarity and coherence. And as above, so below. So in the water, in the mind, air and fire. So as we go through, just to, track your grace state, in an high grace, medium grace, low grace, need to go back to bed, ready to go and run a marathon, just a self-reflection. And so finally, just what do we do when we notice that we've dropped out and we don't have time to go and just take a walk, but you actually need to keep on going with cooking the dinner or driving the car or engaging with the workspace? How do we get back in? And good to have a toolkit. Everybody's got their own way. Pause, deep breathing, visualizations, grounding, cigarette break, different people, different habits of just pattern interrupt somehow is what we're looking for. So my favorites are, so generically, quick catch, resourcing to heart, remembering that we're eternal as well as circumstantial, prayer, never forget to pray for help, otherwise they can't help you if you don't ask them. That's the rule. The helpers aren't allowed to violate our free will, but they're allowed to support any free will that we express. So we need to ask, remember in the spirit realm to ask for help, as well as assuming that it's available. We need to ask to do the free will thing. Mind, random gratitude is one of my favorites. And the process is simply to affirm gratitude for a couple of minutes and not to look for something that you really feel grateful about, because we feel grateful about many things, but I wish it was a blue one, or I wish it was a different model, or I wish it was some other way. So often when we have real gratitude, there's some edge of, but it could be better. So it's not that we're looking for. We're looking simply to move the mind into an assertive state of thank you, and just say it, sort of fake it until you make it style. And so when I'm doing it, I assert gratitude for everything that comes into my awareness. So if I was sitting here doing it now, thank you for the computer screen. Thank you for Faye. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. Thank you for the lamp. Thank you for the wall. Thank you for the door. Thank you for the coffee mug. Thank you for the coffee. Just literally whatever comes into mind. And at some point, and I find generally within a couple of minutes or 2 or 3 at most, just the assertion of it shifts something in the mind. And there's a real genuine sense of gratitude arising from the heart. And you feel yourself back into that grace space and zone. So that's one that I particularly recommend. And as I said, I think the gratitude I experience for myself, the gratitude is the easiest and lowest available. It's always there somewhere as a rescue strategy.
Yeah.
Truth and beauty. I like training my mind to look for truth and beauty as a gin and tonic sort of cocktail, because truth can become moralistic unless you're seeing the true essence of the thing, which is beautiful. You can play with these a lot. Active forgiveness. Stop, stretch, and move. 2 to 3 breathing I wanted to mention. Same with the gratitude exercise. Again, 2 or 3 minutes will get you there. But it's a very specific breath cycle. There's many breath cycles and 100 different ones in yoga alone, and holotropic breath work and different cyclical breathing. But what I've observed is children falling asleep breathe at 2 to 3. And I think that HeartMath was recommending this also to move us into cardiac coherence. And so what's happening is you exhale for half as long as you just inhaled for. So if I counted my breath as I breathed in and I counted up to 2, I'd then allow my breath to go out until I'd counted 3, or 4 in, 6 out. You don't necessarily want to control the breath rate or size. You just want to monitor and consciously extend the exhale even a little bit, ideally, 50%. And again, within 2 to 3 minutes, it does a physiological reset, I think, in terms of the acid base carbon dioxide levels in the blood. So it's going into core physiology. And so an extended breath, if you keep on doing that all day, at some point you'll fall over. So once you got your yayas out, you naturally go back onto an even one-to-one in and out. But just as a quick catch, to consciously spend a couple of minutes with an extended exhale, allowing the breath to be large or small, not controlling the size or speed of it, but just consciously extending the exhale again until you feel a recovery of spirit. And we all know to smell the roses, and that's kind of what we want to feel like at the end of the day. There we go. That's my presentation for you, Faye.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And if anybody, I can see people are watching on YouTube, I say, if you've got questions, just type them in the chat box and we can answer them. I think it's fascinating to understand, as I say, that grace isn't just, I suppose, a lot of stuff nowadays talks about mindset and all this, which obviously it's great. We do need to mind our mindset, but there's something almost clinical and only consciously minded about a lot of the mindset stuff that doesn't link us to our body, to our heart space. And I think, as you say, gratitude is a great link into that. And as someone who, as I say, because I can see auras, the frequencies that so many people seem to be in are not in a resonant harmony with their life. They're blobs of incoherence wandering around and then wondering why their lives are normally not a very good place. So yeah, it's fascinating to see this, and how becoming into, like you say, what am I trying to say? This golden ratio, this relationship, this proportional relationship that brings us into grace, that allows this movement of energies. But it's fascinating to watch. So I'd be interested to hear, like I say, if people want to put in the chat box what their experience of grace is, whether they feel in grace or out of grace, and what do you do? I thought, for me, I love to go for a walk every morning because it puts me into grace. But, we work online, we can have hiccups during the day. My very practical way of getting back into grace is to pick up my crochet for a couple of minutes, because it's very meditative. And
that's
it just
totally alpha.
Yeah.
Totally alpha. Yeah. Exactly.
So it's just, I think, right, where's my knitting or where's my crochet? I just need to calm down a minute and bring myself back into grace. And as someone, I don't actually have any alpha waves either. I found out by having my brain waves measured. So they're just not, they don't appear. So I've got none. So it's like, sometimes I think it's worth, if you really struggle, it's worth having an actual activity that your mind can focus on to get you back into that state. And I think that's what really helped me, was actually having something physical to do to get myself back into a state of grace. Just a tip if anybody really struggles with that. Yeah.
Physical, simple and repetitive.
Yeah, physical, simple and repetitive. And you just go into this meditative state. I did read a book actually once that knitting was actually invented as meditation by monks, and they used to knit and then undo it all and start all over again before we realised we could make something out of it. I thought, I wonder if that's true, the history of knitting. I thought, yeah, so it was a meditational process rather than just a productive process. So yeah, so it's wonderful to
the spinning wheel forever has been a tool of meditation and magical journeying.
Yes, it's like fairy tales, isn't it? Prick your finger on the spinning wheel, the needle. It's that journey into another realm, isn't it? So is anybody be brave enough to type any questions in? Not at the moment. Let me just refresh the page and make sure we've got nothing coming up in there.
We shared everything we could. We've left them in a state of blissfully grace.
We've left them in a state of bliss and grace. So yeah, so I think it's been wonderful to explore grace even more. I do hope people will go away and think about this state of grace, because, you know, the world is not an easy place to live in at the moment. And there are a lot of people going around fractious, you know, at the moment, panicking, aren't they, about the cost of living and all that kind of thing takes us out of grace. So as a personal practice, I think it's really important to regain our own power, our own sovereignty over our own mentality and states of being. And I think, just as I say, just a little quick reset. It might just be stopping and breathing and counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as Mel Robbins recommends, you know, just to pause and come in the moment. All these little mindful moments that bring us back into the here and now are just something to be, I was going to say mindful of, but I've just said that, but something to embrace in your day. We get so caught up, like you say, in this the quantitative thinking rather than the qualitative experience of, you know, how much, how often, rather than just breathing it all in. And that is I think that's the trigger, isn't it, to getting back into grace. So yeah, if you've got any comments, if you're watching this live, you know, let us know. As I say, if you're here live, there might be a problem with my chat because it doesn't seem to be refreshing. But if there were questions, we'll come to them afterwards. But if you're watching it on replay, as I say, put your questions in, and we will come back and answer them. So yes, thank you very much, Patrick. It has been a joy to speak to you again. And, you know, who knows, maybe this will be the first of many. If people would want some more upon this ilk or with other speakers, let me know. So I will see you all again very soon. Bye.